All right. Hello again, dear friends. We are continuing in our learning of Megillat Esther, the very exciting, familiar yet unfamiliar book of Esther. There's so much beneath the surface that we are just beginning to scratch it, I think. So how should we get started? When we last left our heroes, it was the first chapter of Esther that we studied last time, and we discovered a very insecure, power-hungry maniac named Achashverosh, who had risen to the throne at record speeds, and he was trying to hide his not so illustrious past, right? And also trying to make himself a special leader that was not confined by any of the regular confines of a king. Yeah, he doesn't want to deal with the government, doesn't want to have a board of directors, no checks and balances. I want to have total control over the entire empire. And we said he did all kinds of things to achieve that. He switched the capital city. He basically equalized and neutralized the pride of all of the ministers. He invited his servants and the ministers to the same parties. They sat at the same tables. Everyone in his eyes was the same. He was the only one that rose above. In that regard, that led to his trying to diminish the importance of Vashti. You recall that since she was this is just a recap, and we'll get right to the new stuff. But since she was a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar, she was from the royal line. People would say the only rights you have to be king is because she's royal, and therefore you're royal, but without her, you're nothing. So he had to call her out and try to disparage her in public. She didn't agree. He ended up having to do away with her. Okay, and that's where we are left at the beginning of chapter 2. Achashverosh is without a wife, with a very big ego, and a lot of control over the government. He made some pretty rash decisions with the advice of Haman, that the decrees will come straight from him now, and anybody who crosses him is in big trouble. He can basically do anything he wants at his will. He could kill people. He can, and Rabbi Shlomo Brevna notes, we mentioned last time, that throughout the rest of the book, you'll see he's constantly getting advice from a bunch of kids and the butlers. They're the only ones who are willing to run the risk of being around him. Everybody else, the main advisors, he doesn't want to hear what they say, and even if they offered it, if you'd be upset, it could be off with their head in a minute. So he's really set up a strange situation for himself. Okay, so in the beginning of chapter 2, we find ourselves in the very famous, the notorious beauty pageant. It says, Achar hadvarim ha'el. After these events in the previous chapter, that whole political struggle of Achashverosh, when his anger died down, he remembers Vashti and what she's done and what was decreed upon her. And now he's in pain and he's distressed. How am I going to find a new wife? Maybe I did need her. She did have the royal blood and she was so beautiful. And no woman's going to want to marry me because they're going to be afraid that I'll banish them from the palace and behead them or whatever he did to her. Right? So he's really distraught. How am I going to find a girl? So, as we know, Vayomru na'arei hamelech mesharta. Again, who's speaking up over here? The young lads who attend to the king and his attendants, not the ministers who are wise advisors. The minute they say, "Hey, let's have a beauty pageant. You don't need anybody special. As long as she's, drop dead gorgeous, that's it. She's the one for you. That's the only qualification she'll need. Let's gather together all of the ne'arot betulot tavod mar'eh." Ne'arot betulot means a virgin young lady that are beautiful. All the beautiful ones are invited to come to the palace, and you can select who you want. Okay. So the Malbim here reads between the lines over here. In verse number 2, it says, Yevakshu lamelech, they should request for the king, meaning put up posters. Anybody who wants a chance of marrying the king and being the queen, and you're beautiful and you're a virgin, come to the palace. It was a voluntary participation. In the very next verse, it shows that after they didn't find anybody, it says, Veyafked hamelech pikidim b'chol medinot. He established and set up emissaries to go basically and force beautiful women to come to the palace for this pageant in all of the countries. They couldn't find anybody who came voluntarily, meaning women came but didn't fit the bill. So therefore, they forced people against their will, and from all over the country, they forced people to come and join.
Even Americans?
So right now, the qualifications have to be virgins. So we assume no married lady was invited because they were not, which is going to lead to an interesting question about Esther. We'll get there in a moment. And the way the process went was as follows: the the ladies would come, and it wouldn't be right away you go see the king. Right. Somebody's pointing out here in the chat already, and we alluded to here that Esther was married. How are we going to deal with Esther at the pageant? So that's an excellent question. We're going to deal with that in a moment. First, I want to describe to you the way the beauty, I'm calling it a beauty pageant, but the way this application process worked. A beautiful young virgin, if she existed and she was around, they dragged her to the palace even against her will. Once she was there was a 1 year minimum waiting period before actually coming to see the king. Why? Because they want to test her beauty. Some ladies, some people, right? During the summer, they're nice and great. You look tan and nice. But in the winter, they get a little bit shriveled. They're a little more pale. They wanted to test their beauty. They wanted to test their health. Some people are healthier in the summer. Some that are only healthy in certain seasons. They cannot, withstand the cold, or the heat is too much for them. They wanted to make sure that, who's that? Yeah, Mr. Benchir said they're not diseased, exactly. There's no chronic illnesses. So you have this 1 year waiting period where they apply different ointments and lotions throughout them, and everybody gets the same to make sure she's really purely beautiful. Yeah. And when the time comes, the king invites her to his chamber. She's allowed to request any gifts that she wants on the way there, so that people shouldn't think she's being forced. Right? So they kind of dangle this, hey, why don't you come to the king? We'll give you anything you want. Sure, no problem. And that way, she's basically giving her signature to do whatever they want with her. She gets a trial with the king for 1 night. If he chooses her to be his queen, mazel tov. If not, she doesn't get to go home. Once the king has been with her, then no other man can ever be with her again. So she would go to, what do you call it, a harem? A harem where he would just have these ladies that he could call upon whenever he wanted. For the rest of their lives, they would be at the service of the king for whenever he wanted. Could be never again, could be, at his whim. So a really disparaging, disgusting kind of treatment of women. You look at what we're dealing with over here. It's only based on beauty, nothing to do with her character. And the way they treat him was really just like a cattle. I see somebody in the chat over here. Were the girls kidnapped and trafficked and enslaved in the harem for life to be raped? Yeah, correct. That's what we just said. Correct. Okay, so that is the awful, awful situation that we're dealing with here at the opening of the chapter. For this insecure king is trying to find a queen. Okay, now we just have to appreciate the high. What we're going to see in a moment, that Esther took place in this beauty pageant. Yeah, Esther took place in the beauty pageant. The question is, we know, or it's very popularly stated, that Esther was the wife of Mordechai. The Vatahilo Lebat, the pasuk says that she was his daughter. The Gemara says you should read it not only as daughter, which because he raised her like she was his orphan, his adopted daughter, but she was also Tahilo Lebayit. She was like his home. You called the wife the home. So she was married to him. He married her. He saw she was beautiful and had good midot, and he wanted to, boost her spirits or whatever. He married her, and she was his wife. So how could she even be invited to the beauty pageant? Somebody asked that. How could she be even invited? She ended up being chosen. Correct. She was taken against her will, but she's not. She doesn't even. She doesn't meet the qualifications. Why would they even bother with her? She's a married lady, isn't she? They wouldn't know. Okay. So in the list of rules, it says they have to be virgin, but it could be once they saw her, let's bend the rules in this case. Okay. So the first answer I heard to this question was over 15 years ago from Rabbi David Gottlieb. I never found the source inside. It doesn't say much. I haven't seen all of the sources here, just the primary ones. He says that when the king's servants saw Esther, she was so beautiful that they changed the rules for her. They either ignored the rules or they changed and said the king's not going to care, married, not married, virgin, not virgin. She is unbelievable, she's the one. And they just grabbed her forcibly against her will, and they brought her to him. So basically, the rule was she could not be married, and Esther actually was married, but they changed the rules. That's answer number one. Right. I hear. I hear. If you change, it's some identity changing. You don't want that to go public, though, right? It would be really degrading for the king. Oh, he's with so and so's ex-wife. Right. Right. Yeah, she's not going to rat out. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's not so out of the ordinary that such a thing should happen. Very good. There's in the Gaon of Vilna's commentary, there's a few interesting answers he gives. One was, in the footnotes there, I don't know exactly who's speaking in the book, but here are two other answers that I found. One was that, in Judaism, unlike a regular marriage outside of Judaism, a regular marriage is the moment they come together, they're married. The husband brings her to his home, and now they're husband and wife, mazel tov. It's a one-stage process. In Judaism, we don't necessarily notice it because it all happens under the chuppah nowadays, but there's a two-stage process. There's kiddushin and nisuin. There are erusin, kiddushin, that's the same, right? And nisuin. Erusin means it's the initial acquisition, if you will. When he gives her an object of value, commonly a ring, he says, "Hareyat mekudeshet li b'tabatzu," you are sanctified to me. At that point, she becomes halachically his wife, but they're actually not fully married. So she's married, but they are not allowed to live together until he brings her into his home, or a chuppah as we use nowadays, and they do sheva brachas, etc. So it's possible for a woman to be married, but still a virgin. That would be the case with Esther. That's one solution over here. Meaning they had just gotten engaged or whatever. Halachically engaged, which makes them actually technically married. Okay, that's a technical answer. There's one fascinating answer, which comes from the Ravid, one of the great Rishonim of the early age. He says, when Esther was taken to the palace, she was not married yet. Upon being taken to the palace, Mordechai married her only then. Only after she was taken did Mordechai marry her. Now that's a wonder, right? What on earth was he suggesting here? The king takes her, and Mordechai decides to make their lives more complicated by marrying the king's potential wife. That sounds like ridiculous. It's so dangerous, and it's so halachically tangled. What on earth are you going to do? So the Ravid suggests that the spiritual impact of being with Achashverosh is so negative and so detrimental that Mordechai wanted to save her from that. If he became the first husband that she had, then she would not be as dedicated, as deeply impacted by Achashverosh if he was the first husband. So he wanted to basically get in there and save her from the detrimental impact of Achashverosh by becoming her first husband and then passing her off to Achashverosh. He's basing himself on a Gemara which says that a woman dedicates herself fully to her first husband. Or not fully, but there's like a deep connection to the first husband. Okay, so basically he wanted to be the first one, because therefore Achashverosh wouldn't have a detrimental impact. These are interesting answers to this question. Okay, let's focus back on the story over here. At the end of the day, we know that Esther was taken, but it was definitely not by volunteer, and we'll see that there was tremendous chutzpa that they had to have to actually not send her in. The verse introduces Mordechai. It says, Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan habira, one of the verses we read out loud. There was a Jewish, a Yehuda man, a man from Yehuda, who lived in Shushan, the capital, whose name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, Kish, Ish Amini. He came from Jerusalem with the exiled, with Yechaniah the king, and etc. Okay, these familiar verses, when we all announced, we introduced Mordechai onto the scene. So the question is, what's this whole introduction that's doing over here? It's the first time he's being mentioned. So the verse is going to give him like a whole background, or does it actually have to do with the story at hand, which is the beauty pageant and the taking of Esther? Because really what we want to get to is the fact that he had a girl in his house named Esther, and she was taken to the palace. But first, let me tell you about who Mordechai was. And he gives you this long, biography of Mordechai. All right, okay, some storytellers do that. They'll be in the middle of a story, and they mention a new character, so they'll like inject the whole biography. It's not really germane to the story at hand. Is that what's happening here? So Malbim says, no, this is actually quite relevant to the story. It's trying to tell us how dangerous it was for them to withhold Esther. There was a man named Mordechai who lived in the city of Shushan. Imagine this vicious king who was so trigger happy, ready to convict anybody at his whim. He makes an edict that you have to bring the beautiful girls to my palace. You have to, and I will send out people to come knocking on the doors and dragging them over, forced. And you don't comply with that. Your life is in tremendous danger. And when they eventually find that girl, they might just kill her, and certainly the place where she came from. Now, you'd have to have a very good excuse to get out of trouble over here. You have to be able to say something like, "Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize that they were collecting, or I didn't get the news, or I didn't think I was worthy of giving my daughter to the king, or she's not beautiful, or she's not fitted for you." You have to have some really good excuse to protect yourself from the wrath of the king, in this case, for withholding Esther. So that the verse tells us that Mordechai had no good excuses. He was say she's Jewish. He had no good excuses. He was literally putting his life and Esther's life on the line by them hiding Esther. Esther and Mordechai were putting their lives on the line. And that's what the verses mean to emphasize here. He lived in Shushan. He wasn't far off, a few cities away, and say, "Oh, I didn't hear the news. Oh, it must have." He lived in the capital city where the edict came out from. Asher b'Shushan habiran. I lived in the capital city, whose name was Mordechai, meaning his name was a popular one. Mordechai was a leader of the Jewish people, even at that time. He was at the head, and he was a prestigious person. You can't say, "Oh, I'm such a nebuch, I'm such a lowly person, I'm a peasant. It's not appropriate that I should give my daughter to the king. I knew I didn't stand a chance." No excuse. You come from a noble background. Asher hogla, that was exiled. You can't say, "Oh, but I'm just even if I'm a noble background, but I'm just a stranger in this land. I was exiled." You came with the exile of Yechaniah, the king. I mean, when they exiled the initial wave of Jews from Jerusalem, it was all the important people, the kings and the prophets and the leaders. Exactly, right. Yeah, like you're made of the cloth to be in the palace. Yeah, you can't say no one told me. You can't say I wasn't fit for it. And who omenet Hadassah, and everybody knew that he was the sole caretaker of Hadassah, Esther. You can't say, "Oh yeah, I knew she was here, but I didn't realize it was my responsibility to bring her in." No, everybody knew that he was the caretaker of Esther. It was his responsibility to bring her in. Basically, the verse is elaborating and going to detail about Mordechai to show you that he had no good excuse. If he was going to be caught, it was being caught with a smoking gun. Right. So could he have said? So Jonathan recommended maybe he could have said, "I thought she was ugly. I thought she was ugly, right?" And that's why I didn't bring her. That the qualifications were she has to be pretty. So the verse actually emphasizes she was pretty. And now she was objectively beautiful. She was so beautiful, nobody could deny her beauty. Right. So even and the verse thought of everything, every little corner that he could have excused himself, he didn't. So what we're seeing here is a tremendous chutzpah and bravery, the courage, really. It's a chutzpah of coming from a holy side, not the chutzpah that we tell our kids they shouldn't have. This is a holy kind of a chutzpah that I'm trying to preserve the dignity and the holiness of this girl Esther and of the Jewish people. I will put my life on the line. I have no good excuses. I'm in the capital city with the angriest and hot-headed king. Doesn't make a difference. I will not give her up. Sure enough, they come dragging Esther. It says vatilakach Esther, but the expression vatilakach means she was forced against her will, and therefore we see that nobody gave her up. So now that was Mordechai's chutzpah. Now the verse is going to get to Esther's chutzpah. Once she's taken, hey, why didn't you show up? There's 1,000 other girls. We don't really need you. We're just going to drag you out. And we're going to kill you. So that's why the verse has to emphasize that. That she found favor in the eyes of the guy who was in charge of the beauty pageant. She found favor in his eyes. I'm not going to kill you. Like you're something special about you. Okay, so Hashem gave her this divine grace that she was blessed with to save her life, basically. And then she's given all this special treatment. She's fast tracked. She doesn't have to wait till the beginning of the season to get all of her makeup. The Haggai, the guy who's in charge of the women before they see the king, he gives her all the best makeup, and even early, he gives it to her. He gives her 7 attendants, which is normally reserved for the queen. Those 7 attendants, he says, "I know you're going to be the queen here. Just take them right now. I'll give you all the 7 attendants that you need, and I'll give you anything." He gives her special treatment. Nevertheless, the verse emphasizes her chutzpah. She's not going to reveal her background. Let me take a step back here. Excuse me. Mordechai told her, "Don't reveal your background." Why? Because people are going to say, "Oh, why doesn't she want to say where she's from?" I'll ask you. Yeah. Why was it important that she didn't reveal her background? Okay, there was explicit instructions from Mordecai not to reveal your background. Don't tell them whose family you're from. Don't tell them your homeland. Don't tell them you're Jewish. I want you to keep it a secret. What was the point of that?
No, we didn't like Jews, so that was kind of she took her.
Okay, so Jonathan's suggesting that it was important that she should hide the fact that she was Jewish, so that she shouldn't suffer from any anti-Semitism, basically, or he'll behead her if you find out she's Jewish. Excellent. Okay.
I forgot. There's supposed to be an exile, and then of his face.
Right. Exactly. He miscalculated the redemption. He thought the 70 years had passed and God just abandoned his people. So he made this huge party, right? Exactly. That was the opening party. Yeah. We didn't talk about that last week. That was one of the. So to avoid anti-Semitism, if they're really afraid of being punished, we'll see all kinds of behavior from Esther which would really warrant punishment. They're saying, "Hey, where are you from?" Even the king, after she's married, he's saying, "Hey, tell me your background." She's not saying, which means you could just put her to death, or for refusing. You see that they weren't afraid of death. They really wanted to just preserve the dignity, and they didn't want to find favor in his eyes. They were just. Yeah, and that's a good point. Okay. Yeah, that's a very sad ending to the story. Any other offerings? Why was it important that Esther not reveal her lineage to Achashverosh? Any suggestions here from the plastic screen in front of me? My dear friends, who all are human beings, not plastic. Oh, sorry, there's some questions over here. Forgive me, I missed a lot in the chat over here. I'm sorry, I can't do all the catch up. Let me just look at the most recent. Okay, but the truth is they wanted it to fall apart, but she was trying to avoid being taken. So maybe you should tell them I'm married, right? Maybe they're afraid of death again. So somebody asked here, I think Mrs. Fink asked, if Mordecai was well known as a leader of the Jews and she was taken from his house, why didn't they know she was Jewish? Great question. Great question. I was wondering myself. I don't have a good answer for you. Yeah. So one reason why he told her not to reveal her lineage, the Malbim and the Gaon of Vilna, others explain is they're still trying to avoid her getting chosen. Once she was dragged against her will to the palace, they didn't give up. Mordecai said to her, make sure you don't tell them where you're from. That way they'll think that you're a peasant or you're from some like shady background, and they'll say, okay, she definitely can't be the queen, even though she's beautiful. And the rules where you have to be beautiful, but she's got like obviously some issues in her background. We're not going to let a queen into the kingdom if she's got all this baggage. So hide your background, make it look suspicious, and then they'll say, sorry, you can't be part of the pageant. Huh? Why did he tell her to do that? She should have acted like it. So the truth is, yeah. The verses here go into detail. So Mr. Gold suggested Esther should just like play crazy or play dumb and let them send her home. If she's just trying to avoid getting picked, then there's many ways to do that. Like people I've heard of avoiding the draft in different countries and making themselves extremely stinky and whatever it is. Yeah. So yeah. So the truth is, just become drunk all the time. The truth is, the verses emphasize that Esther was completely passive in this whole experience. She was taken against her will to the palace. When they ask her what gifts do you want, she says nothing, absolutely nothing. And the Talmud says, interestingly, on the one hand, she was extremely beautiful, and the other opinion says she had like a greenish complexion, which is not beautiful at all. So how do you put the two together? Was she greenish? Was she beautiful? The answer is although she was naturally beautiful, she had so made herself sickly from the worrying and anxiety and just the, like imagine like a stoic wall that she was just like sitting there in this filthy palace where all these girls were all into their beauty, and she was just sitting there in the corner, not wanting to participate in any of these antics, and she became she like greenish. she naturally became ugly. So maybe to answer your question, is she was trying to make herself, like invalid for the pageant. However, somebody else had a different plan, and that somebody else was God. Right? God gave her just a thread of grace, and everybody who saw her says, "Wow, she's so beautiful." Right? She was fasting all the time, probably not such good breath, right? She was frail and weak and anxious. You can imagine she should not be naturally appealing to people, right? After a good 2-3 day fast, she shouldn't be so beautiful. But God consistently made her beautiful and loved by the people around her, because while this looks like the worst and darkest moment in her life, this is actually the seeds of the redemption for the Jewish people. God is setting her up before the decree even, so she can be in the position to save all the Jewish people. So no matter what, even though she's like hiding herself actively in a closet, when she gets dragged to the palace, she doesn't want to do anything, and they're just forcing her through, forcing her through the car wash of makeup and all that stuff. No matter what, God is making sure she's the one that gets picked, because He wants that to happen. So on the one hand, sorry.
Why would God zap and him? Maybe somebody else.
Yeah.
A decent person.
Yeah, those hypotheticals I never know how to answer. Well, why didn't God just make Achashverosh and Haman drop dead? Perhaps I don't know, right? I can never say. We always have better ideas how to run the world. But one thing that came out was we have this beautiful Megillah where there was a unique way to recognize God in the world that happened in the Purim story, where His name is not mentioned at all, and yet we're able to read between the lines and extract it. And maybe God wanted to give us that message that, look, this all looks like a bunch of random happenstance. It looks like a bunch of mean guys politically maneuvering things. But look who's running the show behind the scenes. Maybe that's why I wanted to do this.
But we weren't exactly worthy of that level of miracle.
Yeah.
When we're almost on the verge of being destroyed.
Yes.
We have to work for it.
That's a question. That's really an interesting insight. Jonathan pointed out that the events of the Megillah are all natural, as we're seeing, right? There's nothing supernatural that occurs, and it's all this like a huge and powerful hidden miracle to save the Jewish people. And his question was, but we were really worthy, right? We were worthy of destruction, not salvation. So how exactly does that work? We were worthy for a miracle, not for a miracle. Hopefully we'll get to that in later sessions.
But at the time,
yeah. So I'm gonna. There's a point. When we'll wrap it up in a few moments, I want to get back to that one. There's an important thing to be said about that. Okay, so we have the Chutzpa of Mordechai risking his life, not revealing his niece and his wife Esther. We have the Chutzpa of Esther, who time and again she keeps refusing all the honors they're giving her, and she keeps refusing their requests to reveal her background and the fact that she's Jewish. And she's literally risking her life. The verse says that Mordechai is continuously checking on her while she's in the king's courtyard with all other ladies. Mordechai would come day after day to see what's her story. So the Malbim says he was coming to see, have they put her to death yet? He was so sure that she was going to be executed. The fact that she had to be dragged there, the fact that she was being antisocial and not appreciative of everything she was being given, he was absolutely sure she was going to be killed. The only question was when. She would come day after day to see, okay, did she make it another day? Did she make it another day? That's how clear it was that she should have been killed. And that's how miraculous it was that she wasn't killed. Right? So here we're discovering another one of the hidden miracles that we could be saying hallel for as we read the Megillah. The fact that Esther survived was against the natural order. Okay. Now, finally, Esther is vatila kach. She's taken into his private chamber. They say you can ask for any gift you want. She says, I don't want anything. I want to make it clear that I'm being forced. I'm not taking anything from you. This is completely against my will. She's taken into his private chamber, and on the spot, he is so eager that he personally takes the crown and puts it on her head. No, you cannot wait for the Pope to do the coronation. Nothing. I want to do it myself. You're the one. I love you. Okay, he does that. Now, for the end of the chapter, the second chapter, we see all of Achashverosh's attempts to try to get her to reveal her nation. The Gemara emphasizes everything that he was doing in the coming verses was all trying to encourage her and convince her to reveal her identity. Are you Jew? Who are you? Which country are you from? So the first thing he does, he makes a big party called Mishteh Esther. I'll invite all the most important people, all the noblemen, And it's going to be called your party, Esther. What is his intention? There's going to be all these honorable and noble and prestigious people around. And she's going to look like some lowly peasant if she doesn't reveal her background. She's just like, some bum without any, so at least she'll let her reveal her background so she can, fit into the party. No, she doesn't. Okay, plan B. He gives tax deductions to everyone. He shows her, look, if you tell me who your nation is, I can take really good care of you. I'll give tax deductions to every single nation out there because I know that one of them is your nation. And all the more so, if you just tell me who your nation is, I'll give them even greater benefits. So look, I'm willing to give the whole world a tax deduction just so I can cover your nation. All the more so if I know your nation. Doesn't help. He gives her gifts, kingly gifts. If you tell me who your nation is, I can give them lots of gifts, right? No, she doesn't agree. The Talmud actually has an interesting note over here. What were the special treatment that Esther got? So one interpretation is she got kosher food, which is interesting. You know, she was Jewish. I don't know exactly how to make that. Maybe it was like some miracle that God just made it, give her kosher food. The other one is he gave her the finest delicacy of the time, which was pork rinds, or pork hinds, or a part of the pig, akila de chaziri. So he thought it was so the question is, did she eat it? So interestingly, there's two opinions. Rashi says she ate it, but she was forced, so she didn't have to give her for life for kosher. Yeah, for kosher, you don't have to give your life. And Tosafot said, God forbid, she didn't eat it. She just had this like beautiful plate sitting there that she didn't eat. When my parents got new neighbors in Miami, they were like, as a sign of gratitude or like whatever, the new neighbors brought over like a whole plate of like turkey and pig and like this whole fancy platter. Like in our country, this is how we move into a neighborhood. And my parents didn't know what to do. They cannot say no, thank you. It was a very awkward and strange situation. It was something like that. Here, Esther, I got you the Persian delicacy of pig. But of course, that didn't do it either. And then here's an interesting question. Okay, it says "V'hikabetz betulot sheni," when there was a second gathering of virgins, and Mordechai was sitting at the king's gate. That's the verse. Verse number 19, if you have the book in front of you, you don't need it. I'll read it to you. When there was a second gathering of the virgins, and Mordechai was sitting in the king's gate. That's the verse. Question is, Esther was just crowned. They had a whole party to celebrate her coronation, and all this stuff has been happening. Why are they gathering more ladies now? What happened?
I would guess that he figured he couldn't pick one, or after a couple, he changed his mind. So I consider that a way we find.
So Jonathan's suggesting it's his servants who are saying, okay, he's probably going to want to get rid of her soon. We know that he's quick to change his mind. Well, let's gather. Interesting. And the suggestions. Why would there be a second gathering of ladies if he already has a wife?
Well,
Interesting. Right, he has infinite. Interesting. Okay. So there's two opposite interpretations that I found, but they both are pointing at the same thing. The Talmud says that he went to Mordechai. He said, listen, Mordechai, this girl that I married, I think you know her. She's not telling me where she's from. I need to figure out her identity. Yeah, he's consulting with Mordechai, who is actually the one who told her not to tell. But he didn't know that. That's why the end of the verse is Mordechai Yoshev b'Shar Melech. Mordechai was sitting in the king's gate. He had been promoted because he knew Esther. Right? This verse is trying to show how much he loved her. He promoted anybody he was close to. Okay, but now he's asking Mordechai, who's sitting in his gate, what do I do with this girl? She's not telling me where she's from. So Mordechai says, I have a good idea. Listen, why don't you make another beauty pageant and show her that like you're ready to move on to another wife if she doesn't reveal her identity? And so Mordechai basically was giving advice, but the ulterior motive was he was trying to get Achashverosh to move on to a different girl so that his dear Esther doesn't have to sit there suffering with Achashverosh. The truth, right? Very nice. She'll still be stuck in the harem, but it'll be less frequent, I guess. As much as you can take away from the amount of time she'll have to be with Achashverosh, the better, right? Yeah, maybe easier to escape if you have 10,000 lady group, right? So that's one interpretation, that basically he was gathering girls again to tempt her and say, look, if I can't get it by giving you gifts, then I'm trying to make you jealous. Now, jealousy, that's a very powerful trait. And if I can make you jealous, then you'll reveal your identity. The opposing approach is that this is the approach of the Malbim and the Gaon of Vilna. He gathered all the Betula. He said to her, look, even if you tell me that you're from the lowliest nation in the world, I'll still stay with you. I love you so much. Look, I'll send everybody home. He gathered everybody into the courtyard and he said to them, go home. That's what the interpretation says. He gathered everyone and said, okay, we don't need you anymore. The show is over. We absolutely picked our queen. Nothing can change my decision. Please, thank you, goodbye. They give them their consolation prizes and all those ladies go home, right? The ones that had not been tried yet. But again, either way, he's trying to show her, please reveal your identity. I love you so much. I don't care where you're from. Just tell me where you're from. It's very important to me and my kingship. So unbelievable how much he was obsessed with this notion of getting her to reveal her lineage. And Esther, at this point, like this, it doesn't make any sense anymore. Why are you holding back anymore? Like no matter what, you see it, you're stuck with him. But nevertheless, she got the instructions, even if it makes no sense anymore. I am not going to reveal my lineage because that was what Mordecai told me. Okay, should wrap it up here. The next episode we have is Bigtan and Teresh. At the very end of the chapter, we have the plot to kill the king that Mordecai overhears. They're speaking in a different language, but Mordecai can understand them because he's on the Sanhedrin and you have to be multilingual to be on the Sanhedrin. He understands the language they're speaking in. He reveals the plot to Esther. Esther tells the king, and conveniently, she tells it in the name of Mordecai, which, okay, and this is just slipped into this chapter. It seems to be a little bit disjointed, right? The first chapter was all about the party and Vashti, and the curtains close after the end of the party. In this chapter, we have the beauty pageant, the selection of Esther. And then you have this other episode of Bigtan and Teresh and the plot to kill the king, and they're saved, and he's saved, and it's put in the book of the Chronicles. Like, why is that here? It looks like it's a little bit out of place. So the next verse, the very beginning of the third chapter is Achar hadevarim ha'el. After these things, Achashverosh promotes Haman, and the decree is issued, etc. What the Megillah is trying to tell us is, before the decree came about, Hashem put all of the pieces in place for our salvation. Before it was even decreed that we should be destroyed, Hashem was showing us that all the pieces are in place for your salvation. I've got Esther in the palace, and I've got Mordecai's name written in the book of Chronicles. So when the king wakes up later and he's all distraught and he wants to figure out how to appease his wife, he's going to see the name of Mordecai, he's going to reward, and it's going to lead to the whole salvation of the Jewish people. That's why these two events are very, very closely linked. The promotion of Esther and the plot to kill the king being recorded in the book of Chronicles. These are the two fundamental pieces that are going to be part of our salvation. They're going to cause, right, the salvation of the Jewish people. And this is a very profound lesson, which is one of the main messages of Purim is Hashem is makdim refu'ah l'makah. When he deals with his children, the Jewish people specifically, he always, before inflicting any wounds or any pain or sickness, he always creates the antidote first. He's makdim refu'ah, the refu'ah, the healing comes before the wound. He first had everything in place for our salvation, our redemption, before we even got into the trouble, which is a profound sign of Hashem's love for us. The only reason that you're suffering is because I love you and I need to get you. I want to get you out more than you want to get out. I've already prepared all the antidotes and everything. I'm only punishing you because it's absolutely what you need. I prepared everything in advance for you. I can't wait to bring you back close to me and heal you. It's such a sign of Hashem's love for us that this chapter 2 over here is a glowing neon sign of Hashem saying, I love you. I promoted Esther. I've gotten Mordecai in the books of the king before the decree ever happens, which is a very powerful message of Hashem's love for us right here, nestled in chapter 2. And God willing, next week we'll continue with the story of Haman and all that.
Yeah, so but obviously Hashem knows what's going to happen, right? But He will. What if we hadn't done true?
Yeah.
And also the punishment isn't how it works. The crime comes first. You just went to the party to celebrate, and that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Then He puts things in place.
That's true, but the punishment was not decreed yet.
Right.
We say that they warranted punishment, but there was nothing decreed yet in heaven until Haman actually signed the seal. When? Oh, later when he said, right. Okay, so your first point is, what if we never did the teshuva? How could it should be setting up? Yes, here, right. we're bumping into this impossible paradox of Hashem knowing everything in advance and yet us having free will. Somehow muzzy. And so an amazing mashal for that, which I've been using recently, is after speaking to Mr. Gilbert, they follow that he's a market analyst, and which means he's supposed to be able to predict, the activity in the stock market. But if you think about it, and he's quite accurate, evidently, right? It's a successful business that's been going, and people keep asking him for advice. Is this going to go up? Is this going to go down? And how does that make any sense? The stock market's activity is based on a bunch of free-willed individuals. Nervous businessmen sitting over their coffee in the morning. Should I do this? Should I do that? And they're panicking, they're antsy, and there's Corona. Before Corona even came, he knew that there's going to be a drop in the market. How could it be? But there's this weird and paradoxical yet true thing that there are events that are definitely going to happen. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. The way it happens, I don't know. That's going to be free will decisions, but it's always going to take us to where Hashem is leading us. So it's not an answer, it's just an observation. Yeah. Any questions from the screen? Thanks all for sitting with us tonight. Hello. Oh no, anyway. Yeah, sure. You have a question? All right, excellent. There are no questions.